As you can see, we're back at the whiteboard today for another music theory lesson. And today we're going to move beyond triads or three-note chords. And we're going to begin to study four-note chords. We are going to be discussing triads and scale tone chords for major scales. So for anyone who's not familiar with those, suggest that you may want to go back and watch lesson number 3 where we discuss some of those things. So having said that, I guess let's get into the lesson. I have here a C major scale and I have the notes of the scale numbered. And as we learned in lesson number 3, a series of three-note chords can be built upon each note of the scale. So for C, we would have C, E, G. For D, D, F, A. As you can see here, a series of chords can be generated using the notes of the scale. These chords are three-note chords and are known by the technical term as triads. When we studied the C major scale in lesson number 3, and we first generated these scale tone chords, we determined the names of the chords. The C chord is major, the D chord is minor. So we established our triads in that lesson, and we've been working with these three-note chords. They're very popular chords that are used in pretty much every style of music, in Western music anyway. Today we want to sort of move beyond these chords. The first thing that I want to make you aware of is that we can actually build a series of four-note chords. And these chords will be built on these scale tone triads that you see here. The method that we use to do this is similar to the method we used to derive the notes of the scale tone chords. So for example, when we look at our C major chord, we have C, E, and G. Just quickly, we derived those notes by starting with the root note C. We skipped over the D and took E. We skipped over the F and took G. Well, we can add another note to this chord simply by continuing from here. And we're going to skip over this A note and we're going to add the B note. And we can do this for every single chord. So now we've taken the triads and we've added the fourth note to each triad. Now we have a series of four-note chords. So now what we have to do is we have to name these chords. And I'm going to provide you with some additional information. This C chord is known as the C major 7th chord. And I'm just going to write MAJ7 to indicate major 7th. And this D chord is known as D minor 7th. So now we have a series of four-note chords which we've built using the notes of our scale. And it's important to understand that these chords are actually based on the three-note chords. So if we look at this C major 7 chord, we have the notes C, E, G, and B. Well, hopefully some of you who've watched these lessons in the past will recall that the C, E, G represents the C major triad. And all we've done is we've added another note. And each one of these chords is a major, minor, or diminished triad that has a fourth note added to it. And when we add the fourth note, it changes the name of the chords. So now we have a series of chords, and I think we should probably take a closer look at these chords. So the first chord I want to look at is the C major 7th chord. So I'm just going to write out the notes of the chord, and I'd like to perform a little analysis. For anyone who watched the lesson on chords and triads, we know that chords are derived from major scales. So in order for us to look at this chord, we need to analyze it with respect to the C major scale, which we have right here. And if we do that, we can see that C is the root note of the scale, and we represent that with the number 1. And E is, so when we analyze our C major 7th chord, what we have is we have the 1st, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th notes of the major scale. And as we can see here, the C chord is a C major 7th chord, and the F chord is an F major 7th chord. So when we're dealing with 4-note chords that are derived from the major scale, the chord associated with the 1st note of the scale and the 4th note of the scale are major 7th chords. And the next chord I want to look at is the D minor 7 chord. And we have the notes D, F, A, and C. So if we're going to do an analysis of this chord, we must analyze it with respect to the root note parent major scale. D is the root note of our chord. Therefore, we must analyze our chord with respect to the D major scale. So we have D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and C. And then I just quickly numbered the notes of our scale. So now we can do an analysis on this minor 7th chord that we have here. And if we do an analysis, we can see that our root note, D, is the 1st note of the D major scale. And our next note is F. We don't have F in the D major scale. We do, however, have F sharp as the 3rd note of the scale, but we need F. So what we need to do is we need to alter this note, and we need to turn this F sharp into an F. And in order to do that, we must flat the note. And if we flat F sharp, we get the note F. Now we must reference this note to our scale. Well, F sharp is the 3rd note of the scale, and we flatted that note to make it F. And this F is now known as the flatted 3rd. So now what we have here is the formula for a minor 7th chord. And what we did was we took the root, the flatted 3rd, the 5th, and the flatted 7th notes of the root note parent major scale, which in this case was the D major scale. Now it's important for us to understand that what we have here is we essentially have a D minor triad. And what we've done is we've added the flatted 7th note of the scale. So we can see our D minor 7th chord as a minor triad with the flatted 7th added to it. So we've looked at the major 7th chord, and we looked at the minor 7th chord. Next thing I want to do is I want to take a look at our dominant 7th chord. That is a G chord. So what I'm going to do here is I want to analyze that with respect to the G major scale. So when we take a look at our G dominant 7th chord, or as it's commonly referred to as a G 7th chord, we have the notes G, B, D, and F. So now let's perform our analysis. G is the root note of the scale, and this establishes the formula for the dominant 7th chord, which is also known commonly as the 7th chord. And what we have again is we have the major triad with the flatted 7 note added to it. So we have one more type of chord that we need to look at and analyze. And that was our B half diminished chord. So when I go ahead and write these notes out, I'm going to get B, D, F, and A. So we need to analyze this with respect to our B major scale. So let's do an analysis on this chord. Let's start with the B, which is the root note. We know that is represented by the number 1. So this sort of establishes our formula for a half diminished chord. And this chord also has another name, and that is the minor 7 flat 5 chord. Okay, but let's just take a quick look at this chord. And what we started with was the root note, the flatted third, and the flatted fifth. These 3 notes represent the diminished triad. So what we have here is we have a B diminished triad. And what we've done is we've added the flatted 7th note to the diminished triad. Now, before I go any further, I kind of want to do just a real quick comparison that's going to sort of explain why this chord is known as the minor 7 flat 5 chord. So if you just indulge me for a minute, let's just contrast these 2 chords. First, let's start with the minor 7th chord. In the minor 7th chord, we have the root, the flatted third, the 5th, and the flatted 7th. Well, if we contrast that to our, I'm just going to write here, minor 7 flat 5, what we can see is that we have the root, we have the flatted third, and we have the flatted 7th. The only difference between these chords is this chord contains the flatted 5th. So this chord here, B, D, F, A, could be seen as the B minor 7 chord with the flatted 5th. So this is why this chord is referred to as the minor 7 flat 5 chord, or the half diminished chord. Let's compare these 4 types of triads. And I want to start out with the major 7th chord. Our formula for a major 7th chord is the 1st, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th notes of the scale. When we're dealing with the major 7th chord, all the notes of the chord come directly from the scale. It's important to understand that the major 7th chord has all its notes taken directly from the major scale. Now let's take a look at the dominant 7. So as you can see, the only difference between these 2 chords is in the 7th. They both start with the major triad, or contain the major triad, with the significant difference being that for this dominant 7 chord, we have the flatted 7. So I like to see the dominant 7 chord as a major triad with the flatted 7. So now moving on, we have the minor 7 chord. If we look closely, we have a minor triad. And we essentially have a minor triad with the flatted 7 note added to it. And that's how I like to remember what the minor 7th chord is. It's a minor triad that has the flatted 7 added to it. And finally, when we look at the minor 7 flat 5 chord, or the half diminished, we have the root, the flatted third, the flatted 5th, and the flatted 7. So this chord here starts out with a diminished triad and adds the flatted 7. However, as I said before, the minor 7 flat 5 chord can be seen as an alteration of the minor 7th chord, where we take the minor 7th chord and we flat the 5th. So now we can sort of see these chords side by side, And one of the observation that I can make is, with the exception of the major seventh chord, all these other other chords contain the flatted seven. What the differences between these chords are in the third and the fifth. Where the dominant seven, we have the third and the fifth that are directly from the major triad. When we get to the minor seven chord, the third, we have the flatted third and the fifth. And these are taken directly from the minor triad. And the minor seven flat five sort of takes this and alters it even further. And now we have the flatted fifth along with the flatted third. And it's important for us to sort of understand the differences between these chords. And if we understand the differences, we won't become confused with them. Put in your time, put in your work, and I hope to see you at the next lesson. Peace.